Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Creative Resistance Podcast. Now, my name's Scott Cassidy, and usual episodes will see me chat to individual artists, activists, and thinkers who refuse to look away and who face up to the biggest challenges of today. But this episode is the first time the podcast was recorded in front of a live audience, an incredible event at Summerhall in Edinburgh, where a group of people from across society gathered together to raise funds and awareness for the Thousand Madleens to Gaza. I was privileged to be able to chat to Salsabil El-awaisi, who's a Palestinian Scottish poet based in Edinburgh who shared poetry and reflections rooted in lived experience and resistance. Also on the panel was Jonathan Foster, who was playing music on the evening with Katie Gibson. We spoke about the role that music plays in resistance and cultures throughout the world. And finally, I spoke to one of my closest and oldest friends, Ruaidhri Mackay. Ruaidhri is an organiser with the International Coordination of Thousand Madleens to Gaza and a member of the UK delegation. Ruaidhri also shared insights from the flotilla mission and his current challenge to raise the Palestinian flag on all 282 Munros of Scotland. It was an absolute privilege to sit down with three incredible people in a room full of like-minded souls to chat all things resistance, all things creative, and to raise funds for such a vital and important cause. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So I'm Scott Cassidy. This is the Creative Resistance Podcast. I'm going to start with a quote by Audre Lorde. And the quote is, "Poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms a quality of delight within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change. First made into language, then into idea, and then into more tangible action." And my hope by picking that quote was that it covers everything we've seen tonight. We've obviously got Salsabil's incredible words and language. I think we've got the music that Jonathan and Casey played, which I think is at the root of so many good ideas and is a universal form of resistance. And then you couldn't get more tangible than action taken by Thousand Madleens to Gaza and by activists like Ruaidhri doing his Munros for Gaza and that kind of hands-on, boots-on-the-ground activism. So I'm going to try and kind of shape the conversation around that quote and see how we get on. So I've got a couple of questions for each guest. So we're going to start with Salsabil. So your poetry, firstly, is incredible, and that was, honestly, it was so moving. So round of applause for that. So, it really was beautiful. And it explores a sort of sense of belonging, lines of lineage, and I think it does so with a sort of beauty that's in stark contrast to the barbarity that we're here to challenge and overcome. So I'd love to know more about your creative process when it comes to bearing witness and the role that you see for artists in times such as this.
Start with the last bit. It's a really important part of artists to take part in what's happening right now, because our existence is resistance. So with, they would want us not to speak up and share our culture, share our stories, because that's how culture lives on and that's how history lives on, is through the storytelling, whether it's through music or poetry or food or clothes, whatever it is, that's how, culture lives on. So it's very important now more than ever. And my creative, what was the part of the question?
So I'd love to know more about your creative process when it comes to sort of bearing witness.
Yeah, so I just feel like it's very unfortunate that this creativity has come out of such heartbreak. Mm-hmm. But it has. And I was saying earlier that I've never shared my poetry before. I've never stood in front of people to read, but I felt so compelled to. But it is out of heartbreak and out of frustration and anger that I've had to do that. So it's unfortunate, but it is. So it's I guess heartbreak is the process. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Love that. Thank you, Salsabil. It is sort of beauty coming out of that barbarity, isn't it? But it's incredible. And then second question for yourself. So You touched on this when you were speaking before about the fact that the mainstream narrative and the mainstream media, I suppose, often dehumanizes Palestinians. We often see people reduced to statistics rather than seeing the humanity in what's happening. So in that context, and again, we've touched on this, I don't think your poetry is just art. It's also a counter-narrative to what's actually happening. How important is it to you to shine a light on the humans behind the headlines? And how important is it to capture those individual stories as we navigate whatever comes next?
Again, really, really important. I mean, there's that movement, we're not just numbers, and it tries to tell a story of somebody that you see, because it's so easy for us to look at these horrendous videos. We were crying, it's sad, but we put them away and that's it. But we know the names, and I think we've fallen in love with so many people in Gaza, like, whether it's journalists or, the girl that cooks, Renad, or Hind. When you put name, it's so easy to connect with them, to love them, to feel a sort of belonging to them. Maybe as a Palestinian diaspora, I feel like that's like my sister or my mom, so it's very important to put names, because otherwise it's just numbers. And I think what statistic came out that it's over 70,000 have been killed. 70,000 is a lot. Like, if you think about the population just in Scotland, we're 6 million, right? And in Gaza it's 3 million. That's half of Scotland. That's a lot of people. But if we don't put names to these stories and these lives, then they're just numbers. So it's absolutely. And the media has been just awful. Growing up, my dad used to always tell us that the media obviously dehumanize anybody that's not white, right? Let's be honest. Anybody that's black or brown, you're always shown really badly. And of course I believed that, but I never really saw it in the mainstream media, or I didn't think I did anyway, until what we saw in Gaza. And it was because it was such a contrast to what had happened to Ukraine just literally before that. Yeah. And the way that the media covered that. And then, what happened in Gaza is awful and horrible, but it was covered in a completely different light. And I think it was a big slap in my face. And I remember telling my dad that, of course, I know you tell me that, you've been telling me this all my life, but really I see it now. I really do see it. And I think they are part of the problem, because when you talk to, anybody in the streets that maybe doesn't have that awareness, their story is completely different, and completely different to what is actually happening, is because of what the media is saying. And that's because they just listen to the BBC or to Sky or whatever it is. So yeah, it's been such an eye-opener about how much complicity they've had.
Yeah, thank you for that. And listening to you speak, I think it's worth acknowledging as well that we're up against an entire system that is set out to other certain groups of people. And I think you look at the politicians that are on the verge of coming into power, those that are in power. I think it's so important that nights like tonight and events like this and organisations like Thousand Madleens to Gaza actually get people's stories out there so we can put names over numbers, definitely. Jonathan, going to come on to you. Firstly, thank you so much for all the music tonight. You and Katie have been absolutely fab. It's incredible. Big round of applause. So obviously Scottish traditional music. I think it's a really lovely kind of meeting of cultures. But just a question on traditional music. So Scottish trad music and traditional music in other countries worldwide, it's often born from times of turmoil. In Scotland, from our own history of displacement, such as the clearances, the exile, loss of land. And I'm interested that when you play these tunes in the context of a Free Palestine event, do you feel resonance? And do you feel that the music knows that it's rooted in struggle and solidarity?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting. So when I got into traditional music, it was never a political thing. It was just, it sounds nice, it's fun, there's a nice community around it. And there was no sort of political aspect to it for myself. And you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not from Scotland. I grew up in Yorkshire. So it's kind of, it feels a bit odd taking on Scottish traditional music when I'm not from Scotland, but I love the community and the music and stuff. And as I played it, one of the things that we found, and me and Katie both ran a ceilidh band for the university for a bit, and there was a huge demand for charity ceilidhs. Basically, people going, well, a ceilidh is something that brings people together. The word ceilidh comes from the Gaelic, which is for gathering. It literally just means bringing people together. That music, for all of those events that the ones we could play where we could provide music to make the event happen, it was, you find that you go, well, actually, do you know what? Like, we're playing for this, and I swear there's a tune about that. Is there not? And so it's funny how the sort of the repertoire, if you start, like, with the context for this, I was thinking, this tune has a story behind it. And it reminded me a little bit of the story very quickly. One of the tunes I played is called Callum's Road, and it's basically about a guy who lives on Rassie, and he lives on the north of the island, and was like, oh, can we have a road? And they were like, the council were like, no. So he's like, well, I'll build a road then. And he spent 20 years building a road by himself. And that tune, I learned it was great. And then you hear it, and it's actually a sort of a story of resistance going, well, so-and-so said this, Inverness Council. And I said, no. And do you know what? Actually, we're going to do it without them. And I think that tune, kind of when I was thinking about this event and what tunes might be suitable, I was thinking, well, that tune, it's about ignoring what the government and waiting on them and organisations and politicians and all that kind of stuff, and saying, do you know what, let's take this into our own hands. Let's do things, because we're not waiting around for awful things to happen. We're just going to crack on and do it ourselves. And I think that's, for me, what this event is about, is about going, do you know what, we've waited long enough, let's go and do something about it. So I find that the music, when you think about it, actually relates to so many different contexts. And yeah, I wonder if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, fantastic answer. Thank you, Jonathan. Next question for you, but builds to something I've spoken to both Salsabil and Ruaidhri about tonight. So about activism burnout. So it can feel all-encompassing. When we were speaking earlier on, you said that there was a point last year where you thought, I need to step back from this. Ruaidhri, I know that you've hit a brick wall on a couple of occasions. So activism burnout is real, never more so than now. So Salsabil gives kind of weight to that grief with her words. Ruaidhri and the team here are raising awareness and doing what they need to do. But it's in music that we often seek a release. And in these ecosystems, I'm interested what function do you think the music serves, and can it be a tool that keeps a movement fueled?
Fab, yeah. I think absolutely, yeah. The music, I think music, like you were saying with Palestinian music, and is such a huge part of the culture. And in sort of leading up to this, we sort of were listening to sort of different Palestinian musicians, and we thought, we could maybe learn one of their tunes, and we're listening, and we're like, I don't think we could do it justice. But it is something that when you hear about it, it's something that you can engage with different cultures through the music. And it's as simple as you can go on Spotify and other streaming apps and find out about the culture through the music that is available. And that's one of the things the internet is great for, is making that music really accessible. And can you repeat what was the other half of the question?
Other half of the question was, in these ecosystems, what function do you think music serves, and can it be a tool that keeps a movement fueled?
Yeah, I think that it comes back to that word gathering that we had, the word ceilidh. I think that music has a power like no other in being memorable and bringing people together and joining people together. Everyone in this room has probably met somebody and realised that you have a similar taste in music, and that's immediately you've got a connection with that person through just sort of a random bunch of wavelengths and frequencies and sounds, yet it connects you on sort of quite an emotional and personal level. So yeah.
Nice one. Thank you, Jonathan. And then I'm going to come on to Rue now, but before we do that, I'm just going to repeat the quote that I said at the very start, because I think a lot of what we're speaking about hangs from that. So the quote was by Audre Lorde, and it's, "Poetry is not a luxury. It's a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change. First made into language, then into idea, and then into more tangible action." So that's what I'd like to speak to you about, Rue. So that quote ends with tangible action. You're doing that. and some. So we've spoken a lot about Thousand Madleens to Gaza, but I want to speak about the other campaign that you're doing. You can see the posters behind Ruaidhri, which says sponsor a summit, the Munros for Gaza. So you're taking your resistance to the highest points in Scotland. All how many? 282. And you're on what number? 17. Brilliant. Smashing it. So yeah, what draws you to mountains as an act of solidarity? And are there parallels between the endurance needed for this challenge and your activism as a whole?
Thanks, Scott. Munros for Gaza was an idea which, we were raising the Palestinian flag wherever we could anyway, and we were climbing mountains and just raising the flag as where we could. I think almost in a kind of like to counterbalance the kind of flag shagging that was going on elsewhere in the UK and like popped up in Glasgow and all this kind of other stuff that's going on with fascism and the rise of fascism in the UK as well. So it's kind of interlinked. So we thought, let's do something that counterbalances that. We're climbing up Ben Nevis on the last sunny day that I've been on a hill, which was early December. Every single Munro since then has been in complete whiteout with about 5 meters worth of visibility in snow and generally pretty crappy conditions. That was number one. And it was beautiful. And we had a chat and we said, look, let's do it. Let's raise on every single Munro in the whole of Scotland and raise the Palestinian flag for a number of reasons, which I'll maybe go into. But you mentioned endurance. Endurance is obviously a factor when you're climbing mountains in Scotland. But it doesn't take that much endurance to climb most Munros in Scotland. And I wouldn't necessarily draw parallels to the endurance that is going on in like Palestine and in Gaza. It's just not comparable. Hearing the stories of people that are, if you imagine all of us today, somebody came into this room and said, you need to now walk to Glasgow and we're going to kill all of you on the way. And that horrendous heartbreak and the Palestinians, they bleed, they cry, they endure things that we cannot imagine. So climbing a mountain is like for kicks, it's for my own pleasure. And I just thought I'd combine those two factors. There's a little bit of endurance involved along the way. But yes, we're on 17. And it is also like a bit of a, shout out if you want to come and join one. I need a bit of company. There's some lonely mountains when you're in like 5 meter visibility and snow and kind of things. It's nice to have a conversation when you're walking up the hills. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I don't know. What was the...
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Rory. And am I right in saying that anyone that's donating to the Munros from Gaza or the Thousand Madleens tonight, that's all the same pot? Same pot. Yeah. So please, there are codes to scan. Nadia, who's over there, is taking donations. So do get involved. Follow Ru on Instagram as well. Speak to us at the end. We can definitely hook you up with all of that stuff and get up those hills in the snow for sure. Right, next one. So Thousand Madleens as a project, I think, is as tangible as it gets. Acquiring boats to physically break a siege. Can you tell us why this specific direct action is so necessary right now, and specifically that type of direct action? And maybe a controversial question, but I'm really intrigued what you would say to those who claim that we already know how these missions end, because we've seen a few now. So why a flotilla? And what would you say to people that say we know how that ends?
Thanks, Scott. So I guess the flotilla, because Salsabil and Jonathan, I think, also touched on this as well, is that there's inaction from our governments. In fact, our governments are complicit in the genocide. They've also been complicit in the 100 years of oppression and land stealing and apartheid and all the other things that have been going on. So are our media. And so me and many other thousands of people around the world decided that walking down the street and waving a placard is not enough anymore. We need to step into an area of nonviolent direct action, peaceful nonviolent direct action. There's all sorts of varieties of that. I'm very pleased to say that today, for example, another example, Palestine action, we can say with confidence and, send the police my way. I support Palestine action. Send them over. those individuals are doing incredible work to step out of their comfort zone, to do things that our governments are, personally, I think they're terrified to do themselves, that our media are complicit in. And so we step into that space. The flotillas, why the flotillas? Because there are other things going on around this. So, there will be I was also part of the global march to Gaza, where we tried to march towards the Rafah border and demand the opening of the Rafah border, for example. It's not just the flotillas that are happening now. There are many, many, many fantastic projects that are trying to break the siege all around Palestine and allow for Palestine to decide for itself what it wants to do. Palestinian sovereignty is the most important part of this problem. And we keep telling the Palestinians what they have to do. And so we want to put a stop to that. We fully support the liberation of Palestine. We fully support Palestinian sovereignty. Just like here in Scotland, we have, hopefully, the right to decide what we want, I hope. So there are parallels in Scotland, in Palestine in that way. So it's all about that. And so we're filling that space, we're filling that gap, and we are taking non-violent direct action in order to break an illegal siege. The great thing about it is we're not doing anything illegal. We're sailing under international law, we are sailing into territorial waters, so at no stage should we be kidnapped, detained, arrested, brutalized, tortured, and kind of go through the Israeli, so-called state of Israeli processes. But it is a moment to then, if we are, to reflect on the fact that what's happening to us as white or American passport holders or politicians or journalists or whatever, all these other people, if they imagine they'll do that to us, imagine what they're doing to people in Palestine and people from Gaza. It's really quite a terrifying thing. So we're stepping into that space. We hope you will join us. As Robbie said earlier, we are recruiting. We need people. We are a very, very small number of people trying to do a very, 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 very big project. So we need more people, whether you can offer like the tiniest of things or massive things like, your time. Answered question? Yeah.
Perfect, yeah. Thank you, Ru. We're just about at the end of this. So the name of this podcast is The Creative Resistance. Resistance is often defined, or it feels like it's defined by what we're fighting against. But I think nights like tonight help us remember that resistance is also about what we're fighting for. So just one last question to all of the panel. We'll just pass the microphone along. With that in mind and what we're fighting for and what we're here for, what gives you hope that change is indeed possible?
Goodness. Only because I don't know if I see hope, so much now. But
Or not, if the case to be, yeah.
But I think the next generation, I really do hope that they bring more hope. I think from what I've seen them do online, as long as they kind of stick to their tenacity, that if you can call it that. But I'm hoping that they will make the change that we're all waiting for, or because I feel like we didn't bring it. We didn't change anything. So I'm hoping the next generation will.
I'm an optimistic person. I can see so many faces in this room. This is what gives me hope. Look at you guys. You've all turned up. The people behind the bar doing the coffees and stuff, they're facilitating events like this. Summerhall as a venue, they've, obviously guys like Scott and yourselves, it's people, it might seem like there's a relatively few number of people in this particular room, and when the cause is so daunting, and like you say, it's a very small number of people aiming for a very, very big thing, but it's small things that lots of people do that come and make big things happen. So I think this is the kind of thing that gives me a bit of hope.
Amazing.
There you go.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I agree with both of you. To not add anything else, I mean, absolutely, like looking into this room, I'm full of hope. Like you turned up, you're here, you stepped out of your comfort zone, maybe some of you, to come to an event that's focused on Palestine. Because our media wants to tell you that we're all anti-Semitic. 80% of the Palestinian population are Semites, by the way. So if anyone ever tells you that you're anti-Semitic, just refer to that stat and just kind of take the piss out of them. Anyway, what gives me hope is the fact that we will set sail together with the Global Samud Flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, and the Thousand Madleens to Gaza on this particular part that we're focused on, of course. There's obviously a lot of things that we've got to be hopeful about, particularly around breaking the siege. That gives me hope, and we're setting sail in spring. So, we will break the siege.
Amazing. On that note, that's the end of this conversation on the Creative Resistance podcast. Huge thank you to all three of you for this conversation, for the night, and for everything you do in general, and to all of you for bearing with us and listening. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Big round of applause.